Okay, great. And yes, welcome. And the other piece that I wanted to kind of get us kicked off with was just a little bit of accessibility. We have automated closed captioning available today, so feel free to scroll down to the bottom of your controls and you can enable those closed captions right there. So yeah, welcome. And we're going to go ahead and introduce ourselves, and we would love for folks to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. We're welcoming you to share your name, where you're from, in terms of organization and role, and then what's something that you want to learn today. Also, if you're compelled and want to put it into this space, what is a bright spot that you're celebrating? It could be professional or it could be personal. Great. So I'll introduce myself. Welcome all. My name is Maria Neaz. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm joining you from Washington, D.C. I am a director of programs here and have been lucky to be with the organization for just about 2.5 years now. And I'm going to pass it over to Akila.
Hey everyone, I'm Akila Massey. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the VP of programs here at GEO, outside of DC and Maryland. And did you do a bright spot, Maria? Yeah?
I
No?
didn't,
Okay.
no.
Okay. Well, I'll skip that. I'll skip that too. And I will pass to Christina.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. Good to see you all. Thank you for joining us. I'm Christina Wirtz. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Vice President of External Affairs at GEO.
All right.
And that leaves Marcus.
Okay, I'll close this out. Marcus Walton. All of my stuff is gone off of my name. He, him, pronouns, president and CEO, going on year number 4.5. And it really is the bright spot for me is anytime we get a chance to come together in this way. I just have so much hope reinforced and so much inspiration from being able to connect and listen and share, tap into our collective genius and wisdom. So I'm looking forward to that today. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. And it's so nice to see folks getting checked in over the chat, some familiar faces and some folks I'm meeting for the first time. So welcome, welcome. I just dropped in our chat check-in right there. So if you joined us a couple minutes late, please, we would love to hear your voice come into the room there. All right. So just in terms of flow for the day, I'm going to pass it over to Christina here shortly. She'll be giving us an overview of our strategy. And then we're going to move into kind of a fireside fishbowl type of conversation between Marcus and Akila over a few questions that we had developed. And then along the way, we want this to be conversational. As you have questions coming up, please feel free to light up the chat. We also have a formal kind of Q&A piece here that you can access through the Zoom control if you'd rather put the question in there. So we'll continue to kind of keep it lively and engage with you both through the chat and through the conversation. So welcome. And I'm going to pass it over to Christina for our overview.
Great. Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much for organizing us. She makes it look easy, but it is not. I'm super excited to share our new strategic direction with you all today. We developed this strategic direction in partnership with Frontline Solutions. It is the result of a lot of engagement with our community, lots of conversations with our members, with other leaders in philanthropy, nonprofit leaders, other folks working at philanthropic serving organizations, our peers and colleagues in this space, right? We thought a lot about GEO's role in the field, GEO's role in the field right now, and what it means to be a PSO of our size in 2024 that is centering intersectional racial equity in our work, and put together this strategy that we're really pleased with and proud of, and is just coming to life in conversation with all of you. And so we're super excited to have, after this brief presentation, a casual conversation with you all about how this resonates, and make it really come to life in the way that it's showing up in our programming and all that kind of stuff. So our mission and vision did not change, right? We continue to envision courageous grant makers working in service of nonprofits. That is the vision that we hold for this world of a just and connected, inclusive society where we're all thriving. And our mission didn't change either. We did very much lean into this kind of marriage in our mission of philanthropic culture and philanthropic practice. And what does it mean to influence the culture of philanthropy and also support and hone in on the practice and the way that folks in our community are doing philanthropy. So those two things remain the same. What we did shift a bit is the values of our organization. So we can shift to the next slide, Mariha. We landed on 4 primary values for the organization, the underpinning of everything that we do. The first is love, reclaiming philanthropy as an expression of humanity, both for the communities that we're serving and for those of us working in philanthropy, right? GEO is a community. We love you all. We want you all to approach this work with love. That seems really core to what it means to work in philanthropy. You gotta love people. The second is community-centered collaboration. We know that this work can't happen alone. And we really, actually, I think I got that out of order. I think it actually goes to racial equity in practice, but I don't. Community-centered collaboration. We know that this work happens best in partnership with one another. We want to resist individualism in philanthropy, and working in community reminds us that our ultimate success or failure is collective, right? This is collective work. Racial equity in practice. We know that the construction of race is central to all social issues. And we know that the construction of race is inherently intersectional. You'll see intersectional racial equity throughout our strategy. And a big part of our strategy is about moving from knowledge to practice, right? We want to see racial equity happening in action. And then finally, trust and accountability. We really want to be in trusting relationship with individuals, and we want to create trust and accountability for philanthropy as a whole, and have some real honest conversations about philanthropy, where it comes from, what it's doing, and how we can be doing our best in philanthropy. We also spent a lot of time developing our core beliefs. How does GEO see the world? What is the way? How do we see the world? How do we see the sector of philanthropy? How do we see our role in it? What do we believe to be true? And then that would lead us to what's the kind of change that we want to see in this world in the way that we see it. So the first is that institutional philanthropy needs to do more to contribute to thriving nonprofits and communities. And the idea behind this one is sort of that philanthropy by itself, without any intervention, without any supportive or challenging spaces, will mimic the systems that created it, the inherently unjust and inequitable systems that led to philanthropy in the first place, that lead to inequities in wealth, that those will just play out in philanthropy. But with some support, philanthropy can do a lot more and will do a lot more. There's an optimism in this one too, right? Like we can do this in philanthropy. We need to do it together. We need to do it with support, and we need to do it with a little bit of pressure as well. The second is that operationalizing intersectional racial equity is key to transforming philanthropic culture and practice. That knowing is one thing, doing is another, that putting racial equity principles into practice is absolutely critical to making sure that philanthropic culture and practice change. The third is that philanthropy's greatest contribution to achieving racial equity is by investing in community leaders, nonprofits, businesses, institutions, and other sort of entities, people that have historically and are currently being harmed by intersecting systems of oppression, we thought a lot about what does intersectional racial equity mean? What does it mean to us at GEO? We see this work as systems work. We see racial equity as systems work. And we know that these systems work in conjunction with one another to keep certain communities and certain people from accessing power. This work is very much about power. And we know that when philanthropy invests in folks that are at the intersections of those systemic inequities, that everybody benefits. The fourth is that people within philanthropic institutions have the power. The people have the power to enact equity-centered change. This is systems work. This is institutions work, and institutions are made up of people. And with support, camaraderie, and community, we can start to be the change that we want to see in this work. And then finally, GEO has a role to advance intersectional racial equity by facilitating culture and practice change at individual, organizational, and systems level. That was helpful for us to think about where are our places of intervention, and our places of intervention are at all three of those levels: individual, organizational, and systemic. And you'll see that throughout our plan. All right, Maria, you can move on to our 4 core pillars of this work: culture, practice, learning, and community. I feel like if you called me up in the middle of the night 20 years from now, we're like, what are the 4 core principles of GEO's 2024 strategic plan? It's culture, practice, learning, community. All of these are really meaningful aspects to us that we'll get into in greater detail. So our culture goal is that grant makers in the GEO community, and I just want to pause for a second and say that is, I mean, those of you all work in this world, you know that every word in a strategic direction has been thought about and workshopped and wordsmithed. We're specifically talking about grant makers in the GEO community because we know that we are a membership-based institution and our reach goes beyond just our members, and that the folks that we have the most impact on are folks that are doing grant making or working at grant making institutions. So we set our goals specifically on supporting grant makers and supporting grant makers in a broad sense of the GEO community, members and non-members. So our goal around culture is that grant makers in the GEO community deepen their understanding of intersectional racial equity, that they deepen their analysis, and that they understand the historical roots in racism and exploitation in philanthropy, the contemporary realities that are created by these ongoing systems, and the current context of the communities that we're serving. With this goal, GEO's really leaning into its role as a culture-setting institution in the field of philanthropy. We don't take that role lightly, right? We know that there is power in this work. We know that we have some influence over the field of philanthropy. We want to use that as well as we can. So our core strategy around this one is providing a professional home base and really meeting people where they are in their own racial equity journeys, right? We don't want folks to see this work and say, you know what, my work isn't really about racial equity. This isn't the place for me. I haven't really gotten into this yet. I don't feel comfortable. This isn't the place for me. Or I live and breathe intersectional racial equity all day. I totally know all this stuff. This isn't the place for me either. But rather, GEO's meeting folks where they're at any stage of that ongoing racial equity journey, for which there is no end. We want to welcome you and create a supportive environment that is both supportive and challenging as folks are in their racial equity journey. My computer just asked me if I want to switch my language to French. I don't know what I'm saying right now that is making my computer want me to be in French. Okay. So that's our core strategy is around being a professional home base and meeting folks where they're at. Maria, you can switch to the next one there. So as we think about how we will do that, I won't read this all to you. This is very text heavy. But here's some of the things that we're going to do to enact that strategy of being a professional home base. Really working on influencing the culture of philanthropy by normalizing these practices as not a separate body of work, right? That there isn't just one way to do racial equity in grant making, but to make sure that intersectional racial equity is central to conversations in philanthropy, and that is the norm. And we'll continue to offer cohorts, role-based convenings, conferences, publications, communications, all those types of things that we've always done. And I know, particularly when we get into the conversation later, that Akilah and Marcus will bring this stuff to life in terms of upcoming programming and what you can expect to see this stuff in action. Our next pillar is around practice. The goal there is that grant makers in the GEO community advance responsive and equitable practices, things like flexible support to communities, centering communities and shifting power, continuing capacity building support, investing in learning and evaluation, providing long-term flexible support. This is the bread and butter of GEO. This has been core to GEO's identity for always. We are a community of practice, and that remains true. We really believe in moving from the knowledge, the culture piece, having a racial equity analysis, to the doing, and making sure that folks are really living into the commitments that they're making. And that's a big part of the impetus of this plan, and what makes it current for 2024 is recognizing that a lot of institutions have made commitments around racial equity that they didn't fully understand or don't fully know how to advance. And we want to support folks. So our core strategy in that is supporting folks in moving from knowledge to action by providing the resources, the opportunities, the connections that expand the support that they have to make that happen. Maria, we can switch to the next set of actions around practice. One thing that is new for us here is going a bit deeper with individual institutions and providing some direct support services to foundations in our network, deeper engagements, including engagements with trustees and boards. We often hear that there's some disconnect between program officers who may come to our conference or participate in our cohorts, or CEOs who may participate in our cohorts, and grant managers who are part of the conversation, or a board member who shows up to something and gets really excited. But there isn't always that connective tissue up and down an organization to make real change happen. And so we're going to do some experimenting with providing closer direct support services within institutions. And just highlighting some of the newer pieces here. So shifting to learning, learning has always been absolutely core to GEO. And we have a little bit of a new angle on it this time around with this new strategic direction. Our goal is that grant makers in the GEO community have a learning mindset, an equity-centered learning mindset, and an ability to embrace vulnerability for collective learning and unlearning and collaboration. And in order to do that, we really want to balance challenging and supportive spaces where grant makers in our community can learn from each other, learn from nonprofit leaders, and are equipped to change their minds and to change their mindsets. So here, the thing I want to highlight in our actions and lift up is we are going to deepen our offerings around equipping folks to do the personal work that it takes to be able to listen, learn, change, heal, and grow, right? This is deeply personal stuff. The way we show up in our work really matters. We have a lot of power and influence in these jobs that we hold in philanthropy. We were conditioned as we became professionals to let go of some of these personal attributes that make a person very open and able to learn and change. So we are going to increase the offerings that we have around that sort of individual support work. We can skip to the next one, Mariha. And then our final goal is around community. Oh, wait, actually, I wanted to say one more thing about the learning piece that's really important, is that we want to continue to support the people in grant-making institutions who are responsible for learning. That learning and evaluation is still a huge part of GEO, and supporting folks in those roles will help us get to this goal of having a community of grant makers that has a learning mindset. Thanks, Maria. And then finally, community, right? We wouldn't be GEO without community. We know that to be true. And we're thinking a bit more expansively about our community with this strategic direction. We want grant makers in the GEO community to work effectively across the larger ecosystems of people working to advance equity and institutions working to advance equity. So in order to do that, we want to show people all the possibilities and opportunities to effectively learn and partner with community leaders, government agencies, businesses, nonprofits. Here, we're really thinking about cross-sector collaboration. And we do have some programs that are experimenting with cross-sector collaboration. And this is an area, Maria, you can switch to the next one, where we're really beefing up our ability to develop meaningful partnerships, both within the philanthropic sector, with other PSOs, with nonprofit infrastructure organizations, and moving beyond philanthropy and working on relationships in the public and private sector to see what's possible when philanthropy really works in authentic partnership outside of itself. And I think that is the quick and dirty rundown of this strategic direction. And I will turn it over to Maria to tell us what's next. Happy to be in conversation with you all.
Thank you so much, Christina. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
I hope folks were able to get a better understanding. I know that it is a lot to dig into when you're faced with a long strategic document. And so just to make sure folks have the same information, I'm going to just share with you the landing page here where you can access the longer document. And also it has a much better kind of easy to access graphic in there as well. So if you're looking for a touch point, there it is. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and welcome Marcus and Akila to come on and have a conversation. We kind of teed up a few different questions for them to have more of a casual fireside type conversation around. So welcome, Marcus and Akila.
Hello.
I have a
Hey,
little guest right now.
here we go. Here we go.
So, I wonder, Marcus, so I can go, like, I'm gonna go drop him off with his dad downstairs. But I know you like to start with gratitude, and I think you do that no matter like what I started with.
That's
So
a fact. Thank you.
if you do that, I'll be back in like 30 seconds.
Gotcha.
Yeah? All right.
Yes. Yes. This moment is just so important. I always wish I could see everyone's face at the same time in these moments, because we still are coming through a period where we have been separated from each other physically, like over the pandemic, and kind of coming out of that, we were impacted by that. And so this process that Christina has taken so much time to walk us through, thank you, Christina. I love how you systematically break down and give us a little more detail. And Mariha, this expression of ours organizationally is the first of many steps to share what we've learned, to clarify what we mean when we use particular language, and within the context of the times that we live in, to underscore the importance of us moving together, right? There's a lot of relational language that you may have noticed. And so Akila and I, and thank you, Akila, are going to really give you an opportunity to understand what this looks like in practice, and even to elaborate around language. And one of the things I'll underscore, which you haven't asked yet, is this thing around racial equity. What does it mean to be intersectional? This has come up so many times in the past couple of weeks for so many reasons. I just welcome every opportunity for us to go deeper, and I'm so eager to hear questions as well. So gratitude for being here. Thank you for spending this time. We appreciate that you could be anywhere else doing so many other things, and instead you chose to be with us. And so we want to make the most out of this and make this something that feels like the most valuable use of your time. All right, Akilah. And Akilah is a partner. We'll both answer questions. We'll be both ask each other questions, and you'll get a little insight into a day in the life of the senior leadership team as well.
And I'm like still out of breath because I was like running up and
Oh,
downstairs.
well done. Well done.
So like giving it was like such a close thing. Like he went down for a nap and I was like, oh, like almost gonna get there, but
GEO is a family affair, you know. We everyone's welcome.
so I guess the first thing I'll say or ask is I heard you talking a little bit and I know I missed some of it. So if you feel like you got to this sufficiently, just say so. The strategic direction, there's some really clear ways that it's responding to like what we see. And someone asked this, was it Melinda? Just kind of how do we see our strategic direction as responding to like conditions in the field? And yeah, it was Melinda Fine. As well as like where we see things that are being insufficiently addressed that we're trying to kind of respond to.
Oh my gosh. You want me to start on that? You want me to be first?
If you don't mind.
I mean, I appreciate our interplay. Let me start. And you rein me in all the appropriate ways, Akilah, but the response. So I've been in this work for a long time before GEO. And when I say this space, I mean this network approach to supporting philanthropy to be its best, to live out its promise, if you will. And I'm offering all of this as framework, a way of thinking about the strategic direction to help you make it very practical for your own work. So the strategic direction for us took what has been a group of ideas, an institutional response to several conversations that are grounded in a desire for not being siloed, for my ongoing passion, my identity to be valued. That identity can be based upon my gender identity, my racialized identity, and by that I mean the construction of race in a way we just talked about a little earlier. It can be based upon my identity as a Midwesterner, and in so many different ways. These constructions support us politically and socially, but also separate us. The strategic direction for GEO for me is an expression that says, listen, those ways of identifying ourselves have value and they are not the end goal. They have been functional at best and incomplete. The impact of operating exclusively like that keeps us separate in ways that diminishes our collective power. And so GEO is a space where our ways of being, our intentionality of coming together will facilitate us being able to tap into a little bit more of what it means for us to have a common sense of our humanity. And then imagine a different way forward, a way of being, if you will, a culture for philanthropy that's grounded in love in the way that Christina was describing it. And so that's the big picture response. And I love how you break it down, though. Break it down for us a little more.
No, I'm just regretting I should have answered first. Went after. I should not have like set myself up to go after you. The things that I'll say, like I think that are important to know are in some ways our strategic direction is a response to like many of the shifts that we've seen in the field, the commitments that people have made that they've then kind of struggled and just kind of not even, I don't even know if struggled is the right word, but that they've been working to implement over time and like have been running into really
Yes.
predictable and consistent situations,
Yeah.
same good and bad, but people
That's
are
right.
having these kind of experiences. And so we're trying to like, one, support people in that. In some places, and that means different things. In some places, it's just providing a peer space. So folks can just be recognize that they are shoulder to shoulder with many other people who are trying to advance the same changes that they are. In some places, it's where the commitment is a little wavery, or maybe it's not as deeply rooted as it might be. It might be like kind of understanding a racial equity commitment and what that means, why that is something that they want to do, like how that will further their impact and kind of give some more heft and a rootedness to it across the organization. And in some places, as Christina was describing, a professional home base, in some places we're providing that, like that's the kind of the thing that's needed. So I think it's just that we're doing kind of a little bit, we're trying to be responsive to like a lot of situations, all with the purpose of like supporting people and shifting the sector.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. See, I knew you were gonna say something like that. I gave you the door and you gave it back to me. It's okay. Thank you for your generosity. No, I'm just picking. Please keep going. Keep going. That was good.
I mean, I wonder too if we want to talk, and we've talked about this a little bit, but we and the team came up with this kind of question of like, what are the trends, the needs, the gaps, the challenges, the opportunities, like all of those kinds of things. We've talked about some of them, but I wonder if there's anything else.
You know, I'd like to go right to the elephants in the room, if you will. And I love that, again, one of the things we're describing through the strategic direction, at least in how it's operationalized, is there's a set of ways of being. So we'll often refer to ways of being as how we show up in a way that is relational, that builds trust, if you will. That's the importance of the relational component. Building trust, appreciating that at the end of the day, change happens when those things occur. When trust is developed, we give each other a chance to make commitments and follow through on them. And so one of the big elephants in the room today has to do with the kind of broader context of the the culture, the space, the political context that we live in. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of feelings of exclusion and marginalization, right? And it shows up in a few ways. One of the earliest ways, I wish my colleague Kashif was on his phone, but when I first started at GEO, there was a lot of anti-Islamic sentiment, right? And there's all types of different forms of hate, right? Lately, most recently, we've seen anti-Semitic hate really take the forefront of a lot of conversations, but not be explicitly named as a driver of oppression in a way that's intersectional, and which is what GEO believes. But there's also a gender conversation that is like right beneath the surface, but not explicit. And so there's some ongoing learning in real time of how we can even be better about how we connect the dots. But our attempt is to be intentional and explicit in how we connect those dots, right? And so I would be remiss, of course, the first thing most of us think about in the American context where we hear something like racial equity is Blackness or African Americans. But what we're saying is that there's something about our history, right? So it's important to look at historical context to understand how conditions are today. Core to the American experience is the erasure of Native and indigenous populations and anti-Blackness, which is connected to both domestic colonization and imperialism globally, right? But these things are so woven into the principles of the nation that all of the structures and institutions were designed to reinforce either the accumulation of resources, power, wealth, or the ongoing disadvantage of different groups. And we have all had a turn. And so like naming that we all have a turn and that acknowledging all of the different groups and the ways in which we're situated inside of this kind of puzzle of inequity, connecting that to the practice of institutional philanthropy, allows us to take responsibility for changing conditions. If not at the strategy level, that at the culture level, we get to name the things. Why is that so important? Even with that, why is that so important? Because when we name the thing, we can address the thing. When we don't name the thing, when we don't make the thing explicit, and we believe that leadership, one of the key functions of leadership is to make the implicit explicit. When we don't make the thing explicit, it can sit in the background and continue to undermine the best of efforts, regardless of the amount of resources invested into problem solving. And so instead, as a community of folks that are multiracial in terms of our coalition, but organized around a shared vision for thriving, that's expressed through a variety of communities across a variety of identities. We're saying through our collective efforts, acknowledging the experiences that all of us historically have had and continue to have to address. Now we can start to do the healing work, right? We can start to support each other, and Marcus can do his work. I can do my work in the context of supporting others, but bringing the intentionality to it. When I say doing the work of healing, I'm talking about recovering from what it means to have generations of folks that are loved ones who nurtured me being impacted by generations of inequity, by policies and practices that disadvantage them in ways that today I don't have to worry about and experience in the same way. Well, when we're intersectional in our approach, we appreciate that this is the systems that Christina was talking about, the overlapping systems, the drivers of inequity. And so the next group is coming. If it's anti-Asian hate, like this is also connected to that. If this is anti-Semitism expressed now in so many different ways, this is also connected to that. We can have different opinions and perspectives and not move toward a hate or exclusion of an entire group, right? But we are out of practice, right? What Geo is saying institutionally is that let's be intentional in our abilities, our competencies to be able to disagree about all of these things, hold different perspectives, be at different stages of our own practice, and still moving together around those things that tie us together the most, which we believe once you go beyond those constructions, those racialized constructions, those socialized constructions, it amounts to our shared humanity.
Yeah, there's so much there. Like there's so many places we could go with what you set up. Maybe like as a part of it, and I'll go with one first. So in what you were describing and in our strategic direction, we've like laid out our interest in supporting people and deepening their own racial equity analysis.
Mhm,
And I think a lot of what you're saying like is describing like why we would do that and how.
mhm,
One of the examples that always comes to mind for me, because it's something that was really present in our sector, we've seen a lot, is this kind of lumping together of people and as a part of their strategy, like they're wanting to support like BIPOC-led organizations, for instance.
mm,
And the reason I like to kind of take that example, it isn't at all in like wanting to say that that was like a wrong approach or that it's
mhm,
bad. The
mhm.
thing is, I think though it is incomplete. It is
Yes.
it doesn't there's a way to be more specific. And that's
Mhm,
what I heard you describing. Like where can we make everything that is implicit, where can we like bring it up so that it's so that it is more explicit? And that's a thing that we're really interested in doing. And like just
yeah.
trying to walk people through like what is the work that you're trying to do and like what is the most effective expression of that and like what does it require you to say, what does it require you to dig into, what history do you need to uncover,
Yeah.
all
So
of that.
say more about that, Akila. So like you just broke down. So what was that to me is a framework that you just introduced. So when I live without a framework, then I don't have an intentional way of saying like, hey, oh, here's another observation. And then I go through a set of steps to make sense of what's happening. And
Mhm.
what I heard from you is a way of starting to do that. Are you outlining a framework when you talk about racial equity? Like I've heard this thing called a racial equity imperative. Like what is that? How is that connected to this strategic direction? If you like,
Yes,
I'll
so,
let you
so
know.
we have taken the time to kind of to lay out a racial equity imperative. So like really simply, and again, I think we're probably Marcus and I are in some ways like repeating, but it is our hope to like really make it clear. But when we are talking about like racial equity, we are always talking about like we believe you can't be doing racial equity work in an ahistorical way. Like those things are just completely at odds. And so to do that, like when we are trying to do racial equity work, we are both looking at what has happened, like Marcus is describing, looking at the structures that have been in place, looking at what they've created, and then the disparities often that they've created and trying to unpack that so that we can then work to create and adapt like the system so that they aren't creating those disparities. And so like just through that process, it lets us get more specific. So like instead of like I was describing like a BIPOC, we can understand like, oh, in this place, these are the things that have, oh, and yes, that's true.
Yeah.
You should say more about that. But so in place of like kind of something that's really general or broad, like a BIPOC, we can understand what has happened here specifically, what has happened here when we lay on top like the specific issues or issues that I'm trying to like change. And then how does that compel me to do something different?
I love that. I love that. Thank you. Like the thing that always reverberates when I hear you describe this, when I think about structures and try to simplify some of this language, is that it comes back to that trust. It comes back to, when I feel excluded, when I feel like, I mean, there's heartbreak in marginalization. Like I almost wish we could just use heartbreak instead of some of the, you know what I mean? Like it's just
like
a more accessible.
disconnection, and it's like
Yeah,
disconnection is heartbreak.
no, that's right. That's
Mhm.
right. But when I feel down, it doesn't really matter what tool I use to do my work. I'm not bringing my best. I'm not capable of tapping into my best because my enthusiasm is a little far away for me to tap into, right? But when we view structures of like, oh, this sentiment that's being directed at me is actually one whose source is this kind of set of systems, that there are a set of variables that have made things this way. Now the thing that I'm able to do is not blame myself, not say like, I didn't mess this up. It wasn't me and my family. It wasn't like Black folks in Cleveland that are the reason for our neighborhood deteriorating in the way that I saw it when I moved on to school and progressed through my adolescence. There's some disinvestment that takes place. There's some decisions that were happening here. There's some decisions that were not happening here that left these communities to their own devices, absent of the kind of support and reinforcement, the rebuilding, the preservation that happens in other spaces. And so like Geo is a space where you can bring your individual space. Like I was saying earlier, you can bring your observations about those places on the map in the nation that tend to be overlooked and underappreciated, like my OKC people, right? I love that we have that presence because it's a reclamation of some significant portions of our collective genius. Like too many groups have been left out of the equation, the consciousness, if you will. And so what we're able to do is to say the culture of philanthropy operating at its best can fulfill the promise of the nation itself. On some level, we can be a microcosm. And for those of you who are in systems work, it's kind of fractal thinking, right? There's the macro and the micro. What we practice in the micro is available and accessible and possible in the macro as well. And so we're testing and learning the whole way.
It's like so optimistic, and I think
but I love that you say that because that's also how sometimes people feel, right? And to the point where Marcus, you're being toxically optimistic, and I'm saying, well, what I understand about racial equity practitioners are that we're the most rigorous in our analysis because we insist on the most nuanced, disaggregated accumulation of data and observations possible.
Mhm,
Right? When
mhm.
we talk about measuring progress, we connect with the people who are closest to the work to develop indicators of progress that most accurately reflect the experiences of all involved, right? And so it's really not my opinion at all. We eliminate the subjectivity as much as possible. It's human beings are going to be subjective. That's what we do. But we are fortifying our observations and the patterns and trends with a nuanced accumulation of data that suggests that different groups in all kinds of different ways are situated differently. And so with limited resources, we can prioritize how to direct those investments. Like that at its core is what we mean by this intersectional approach to equity, like why it matters. And it's not everything. Like GEO is not a racial equity organization. GEO is a platform to transform the culture of philanthropy, to practice together and imagine what's possible from an affirmative exploration of philanthropic of possibilities for philanthropic practice.
Mhm. And I love that you said that because I think it is even so we've been holding like calls just talking about the strategic direction with folks all over our community. And one of the things they're like, so wait, is GEO all racial equity? Is that all you do?
Right, right.
And I think it's like it's nice to be able to like to just dig into to remind people that over our history, we've been talking about things like capacity building. We've always been advocates for flexible, reliable, like funding, like multi-year general operating support. Um, Talking about like learning and evaluation work, and that those are all still, as Christina was describing, those are all still really important parts of like the work that we're doing, the ways we're engaging with people, and we can like be super one of the ways that we think that work is going to be most effective is when it's community driven, like that communities are appropriately, consistently, deeply involved in shaping the work and like being a part of it. And then also that when it's equity centered. So it's not that we're about like racial equity, we're about many of the same things that we always have been. And we think like we're saying like we think this is how this work will be most effective. Is that how you would say it to Marcus? How would you describe it?
I would. The kind of shorter way I think about it is that the history of this nation shows that the kind of strongest approach or strategy, if you will, for gaining social progress, advancing social progress, is through multiracial coalition,
Mhm.
right? And so all of the things related to what does it take to move, organize ourselves across difference in a way that aligns with our values, right? To be clear about our shared issues and interests. This is all what we're talking about through GEO. We're breaking it down into being able to organize into cohorts. Perhaps you're looking at the level of leadership that you're operating from inside of your institution. Maybe you belong to a specialized network that is identity based or issue based and don't have otherwise have an opportunity to work across issues or across identities. You can plug into the GEO community and do that, make that a reality. Perhaps your focus is programmatic. You want to get better at operations or measurement, right? Learning. All of this is possible. So we are a platform for folks to really be intentional about growth, about stretching, about extending beyond those boundaries. Like to me, the hope here in the declaration that we're making at GEO is that our ways of being are worth it. Starting with the individual, how you show up in leadership has everything to do with the power and influence that you can bring toward the change that you want to see in the world. And we're just also conscientious that it's not about Marcus and Akila or our individual interests as much as how that interest connects into the broader sense of well-being, the conditions that are really driving experiences within the spaces and ultimately within the collection of communities that make up this nation.
Mhm, mhm. I I think like maybe because I know we don't have much time left. And it might be interesting to talk more just about the competencies that are needed to like kind of to be able to do these things. And I mean, I think maybe people are interested in like the things that we're thinking about as an organization, like what are the competencies that we'll have to build, but then even maybe even more, like what are the competencies that we think like that the sector is going to have to build? Like what will people have to
Well,
do to
yeah.
like
Let's go back and forth on this because I always learn a lot from listening to you do this too, which is also a part of our theory of change, right? Learning alongside our peers. It just helps see a different perspective here, a different perspective, in a way that going it alone doesn't. But the thing that occurs to me the most when approaching this, Akila, it's really about I'm sorry, say the question one more time. I almost got it.
Oh, I'll say
Uh,
it quickly because I was kind of rambly.
yeah,
So what are the competencies that we'll
that's right.
need?
Right. And so at our core, to me, like the ability to grapple, right, is critical. Deliberative um engagement around an idea, to come in with a point of view, be open to it being shaped, refined, perhaps expanded without confusing that idea as my identity, right? I am not what I think. I'm bringing this expression of the sum total of my experiences to bear as a core driver of my beliefs. And then through that vulnerability practice, all right, so now I'm getting into the other competency, the openness to being shaped. I leave a different person. I leave informed by someone else's experiences, history, point of view. Vulnerability practice that shows up in some part as being able to grapple, to me, is one of the more profound leadership competencies for driving transformation. Transformation being the breaking down and reconfiguring of the structures that that hold and reinforce these kinds of conversations. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, certainly those. And I think it's like, it's interesting. One of the things that we hear a lot when people start to like really get into it, um, is how it feels a little different. Like racial equity related change feels different to people than other types of change. And I think some of what you're describing there is a part of why, like, there is this kind of this personal transformation that is either you're being pushed kind of into it, resisting it, or that has to happen. So that's definitely feels like one. I mean, I think others, for Geo, like one of the things we're thinking about is how we can hold spaces that can allow for that sort of back and forth, the grappling to happen. So like, what do we like need to be able to hold?
Yeah.
And how do we do that? Like make spaces where people can kind of, I think, how do you describe Marcus as like say the thing that they haven't fully like
Yeah.
that isn't fully considered or something like that.
Yeah. Well, you're naming, you're describing, right? The notion of consideration. Like, don't take anything I'm saying as truth, but consider the relevance of whatever it is that you feel. Like it's a very I feel like when I talk about vulnerability, what we're inviting is for a kind of intimacy around the things that we care most about, but it's values a lot. It's values, vision, and purpose that's shaping our interaction, right? And we have to learn how to do that. The thing I was going to say, Akila, that you were bringing to mind when you were describing this kind of consideration process is an old saying that you know, when we want to see change out there, we have to allow the change to take place here. Right. So they're like, I feel like Geo is making a really bold statement in saying like external change doesn't happen if you are not open to yourself being changed, right? The transformation is our mindsets and attitudes. And then by way of our relationships and commitments, because I'm making promises inside of that, right? You're helping me recover. from the inequities, the impact of that on an ongoing basis, but I'm also then from a place of feeling whole, saying out of gratitude and appreciation for these powerful relationships and our shared sense of humanity, I commit to showing up in service of our collective well-being. And so like now I'm operating from a different level, a different level of accountability that alone is just about me serving myself in my particular interest. So it goes beyond the kind of dominant culture of competition and like we talked about kind of individualism. And it's not to say that we don't have individual thoughts as much as it is to say that I'm making myself open to change at any given point. Right? So it's not about my role. I can share this space with you without feeling like you are undercutting my authority, right? My authority lies with the group. You give me power. You say, Marcus, I think it's okay for you to speak on this because I've been in spaces with you and I see how you practice. I know what happens behind the scenes. That's the kind of trust and confidence that I understand we all want to have each other across all of those groups of identity that I was describing. And right now, the sector, the institutional practice of philanthropy takes place in too many silos and too many, it's almost like we haven't rejected the way we've been socialized to compete with each other for resources, to compete with each other for airspace. Right now, there's a million different articles being placed in the Chronicle about a million different things where I can remember a time when hardly no one could get access to that platform, right? To talk about the issues that were germane to their particular communities. They all matter. They all matter. And it matters that we take our time and have a very nuanced conversation about the impact of inequities, the impact of structures, the history, and how the conditions that our folks are experiencing today are influenced by the decisions, the policies, the practices, the ways that media is organized. Like all of these power levers in society matter, and they are all intentionally designed to reinforce a particular narrative. And we all live in narratives. We live in language. And so we need to tell a different story. There's a reason why you feel optimistic. It's because we're about narrative change, unapologetically connecting us at our core and simultaneously acknowledging the history of the various groups we belong to. That honor matters. It's wisdom in the history of the folks that we belong to too. And too many of those culturally rich heritages, those culturally rich wisdom practices have been excluded through assimilation. And we're saying, nope, let's bring it back. We need all of it. And perhaps now's the time. Let's see. We don't have to know, but I'd rather try things with the collective group of the folks here than to fail on my own and leave people's wisdoms and experiences out of the equation because I feel more comfortable that way. This is not about anyone's individual comfort.
I love it. I feel like I want to applaud, but maybe that would be weird.
Well, if you say that, that means a lot.
I know we have time for questions, so please, if folks have questions.
Yeah, can we do the group thingy, the view? Can I change my view?
Yes.
I want to do my
Unpin yourself.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and unpin folks.
And thank you. So many of you still here after an hour. Like that just amazes me.
And it's always hard at the hour because then you have something else gets scheduled. You're like, oh, I can be there for 60 minutes and then I have to
That's right. That's right. And if you have to, that's fine. We're not trying to trick you here, but we really do take this seriously. And the fact that you hung in there, we really want to hear your voices. So please.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop our recording and
Thank
then
you.